What's up, everybody? This is David O from the VR Report. I want to introduce you to Dean Takahashi, a game journalism veteran with over 2 decades of experience shaping the gaming landscape. Dean is the lead writer for GamesBeat, and he's the go to journalist if you want to get your game noticed. From the San Jose Mercury News to the Wall Street Journal, Dean's seen it all. From the evolution of gaming consoles to the birth of new technologies such as XR and blockchain, Dean has a unique perspective of how games will evolve in the future. In our interview, he delves into the exciting realm of the Apple Vision Pro and predicts what games will be popular on its headset. We talked about AI, and Dean even shares his thoughts on funding universal basic income through gaming, making life better for all. Friends, here's Dean. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is David O from the VR Report, and I have my good friend and journalist extraordinaire, Dean Takahashi. What's up, Dean?
Hey, how are you?
I've known you for a long time because I launched one of the first social games for Ubisoft. It was called TikTok, and I asked you about it like this past AWE if you even remembered covering it. But I remembered you distinctly, and so did everyone at Ubisoft when you came to cover the game. Um, but yeah, you're just such a mainstay in the industry. You basically have two worlds that you speak in because not only do you do GamesBeat, but because it's an offshoot of VentureBeat, focusing on venture and investments for the games industry. I think a lot of developers, startups, and even bigger game companies follow you, and of course you have that conference every year. So anyways, without further ado, why don't you do a better introduction than I can?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity here to engage with you. I enjoy these conversations immensely. So, I'm Dean Takahashi. I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat. I've been a tech writer for 35 years now, and moved to Silicon Valley in 1994. Back then, I was mostly doing tech coverage, covering chips and Intel, and got to write the first, say, story on NVIDIA ever when it was at the San Jose Mercury News. Uh, yeah, and about 20% of what I did was cover games back then, and now it's flipped at VentureBeat. I've been at VentureBeat 15 years. I've been covering games as a sort of a daily or a weekly thing for 27 years, and the last 15, about 80% of my time has been on games. I still spend like the 20% on all other things tech, including the chip industry as well. But I also run the GamesBeat Summit events, and our next one's coming October 24th, 25th. The GamesBeat Summit next in San Francisco. We also do one in May in LA. So that's me.
That's super cool, Dean. And I know that you grew up. You've always been a Cali guy. So you grew up in Sacramento. You went to UC Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell me about just you growing up in California and kind of like the backstory. We never really got into detail about who your education, what got you into journalism in the first place.
Uh-huh. Well, I think I was uh, impressed with the journalistic life, going back to things like watching All the President's Men as a movie back in the Watergate days, really when the journalists were viewed as the heroes, and the Washington Post helped essentially bring down a corrupt president, Richard Nixon, and um, there, journalists were also sort of highly thought of after the Vietnam War in exposing a lot of sort of injustices. And uh, uh, I had some hopes of actually being some kind of foreign correspondent at some point,
Cool.
and was always very interested in politics and things like that. Also read a lot, like, I was a big science fiction fan, and I thought maybe I'd be a novelist someday, and that part never really materialized. But I did read things like, say, Snow Crash when it came out 30 years ago, and have been a fan of that kind of thinking. The blending of science fiction, technology, and games to me has been a very interesting sort of a thing to focus on during this whole career. And so I like finding things that are at the seams of those categories where they blend together. And it started getting really fun probably in the last 10 years or so when people like, game people like, say, Tim Sweeney or technology people like Jensen Huang started saying science fiction is becoming real, right? And uh, artificial intelligence, has been a sort of growing, innovative, sort of revolutionary breakthrough that has the potential to make so many other things happen that we never thought would happen. Right? We never thought AI would really happen because it had gone on for decades without any real progress. But now, the last 10 years, it's like amazing progress. And what does it enable? Like, those sort of ambitions people had to build the metaverse are possible because of AI. And they're also, say, more desirable now that we've gone through things like the pandemic, right? And in the middle of the pandemic, metaverse-like things like Zoom were the only ways to communicate. So that's been fun. More on like personal side, I did also go get a journalism degree. I was an English major at Berkeley, and I got a journalism master's at Northwestern University. Did a few internships and started out working in newspapers like the Dallas Times Herald and Orange County Register and San Jose Mercury News. I did a stint at the Wall Street Journal as well, Red Herring Magazine, back to the mark, and then VentureBeat ever since. And I think what I found at VentureBeat, sort of more like with the blogging revolution, was more control of my own destiny as to what I'm going to write. And basically, I get to decide what I will cover and how I'm going to spend my time. And I think that's been a very good part of the last 15 years.
That's super cool. I think people don't also understand the, I guess, the courting of journalists in the games industry in the early 2000s before like social media platforms and giving kind of like democratizing that anyone can actually write about games content. In the early days of gaming publishing, especially at Ubisoft, we would really cater to journalists. Like we would go all out to make sure that we invited you guys to the best parties or have like special one-off events. I worked on Ghost Recon where we actually rented out the whole Presidio and hired military aficionados who are professionals teaching people how to, barge a room, and with all the real equipment, etc. And so it was a really exciting time, especially for journalists, because you guys got to see all the insides and outs, and you guys were flown all over the world and got to attend the biggest parties. And you just mentioned like Tim Sweeney, Jensen from NVIDIA. You've met a lot of cool, great people over the years. Can you share like some of your most memorable experiences with your journey through gaming and journalism?
Um, I mean, I do remember going to a Gamescom and then meeting with Tim Sweeney there, and it was oddly easier to meet with him in Germany than it was to say find him in the U.S.
Right.
But we did talk quite a bit at that point some years ago, probably looking at 8 years or so ago, where he started bringing up. I think the metaverse should be doable in the next few years or so. He talked about blockchain and whether that technology made sense. At first, they were in favor of it. Later on, they decided against it. But when it was up on the radar of people like Tim, then I started paying more attention because, yeah, I've known about the metaverse for decades, but I thought of it as the same thing as the Star Trek holodeck, right? Never going to happen.
Right.
Like, when is computing power going to get to the point of doing perfect simulations like that and let you switch from world to world to world instantaneously, right? We're still kind of far from that, but that's how I thought of the metaverse, really. And I think many people have other definitions, some a lot more practical, that are basically here and now already, and then they have ambitions to get better over time. I think Tim in that way has been very influential in guiding where people think the industries are going. right? And then Jensen Huang was very similar in the same way. He says, you know, I don't really have to read science fiction anymore. I am science fiction. We're delivering the future with AI chips and AI technology. We're in the middle of this explosive generative AI revolution now. Even just last week, I moderated a session with a professor who's focused on AI and AI startups and innovation, David Schreier from Imperial College in London. And he said, look, the next 10 years of AI are going to change the world so much and change industry so much. You can sort of more obviously see right now that a given company of 2,000 people could have 1/3 to 2/3 of its work done by AI instead of the people who are there now. And you can also see how the things that are being done by the biggest companies now could be done by the smallest individual contributors, right? The sea changes that are coming with all these things. So he thinks in 10 years, we're going to have more change in society and business and technology than we saw in the Industrial Revolution of 150 years across time, which gave us all these things like, trains and steam engines and cars and World War I and World War II. All of that 150 years, he thinks, is going to be sort of outdone by the next 10 years. So this is these are very interesting, sort of points that make me think about how the world is changing.
That's awesome. You mentioned a couple of things, your discussion with Tim Sweeney, of course, the guy behind Epic Games and behind Fortnite. A lot of people say, well, Fortnite is the metaverse in terms of concept and theory. What's your definition of the metaverse?
I think it's not so far from that notion of having, a next generation of the internet that is spatial, 3D oriented, and spans more than just sort of one version of the metaverse. Really, the metaverse is all the things, all the virtual worlds collected together and connected in some way, so that you could, migrate from one to another with your stuff, with your identity, fairly instantaneously. And things like that we saw with, say, the movie Ready Player One. I think of that as more of metaverse than simply playing games, online games inside World of Warcraft, or separately inside Roblox, or separately inside Fortnite. Right? Those are sort of the beginnings of the metaverse, but they're not what I would say that they're not the destinations that I think are implied by people who believe in the metaverse.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that same definition that you have, which is we're not fully going to get to the metaverse when it gives you all of the benefits of what we envision in science fiction, full embodiment, full presence, and being able to travel, virtually in any location. But I have something contradictory in the sense that I think we're already there. I think in terms of the metaverse, and you kind of nailed it, which is having a digital identity and being able to be transported between different environments. And that could be Discord, that could be any of your favorite social platforms. And the missing component there, I think, is being able to use an interface like a headset to then visualize and embody these digital platforms from, because when you really think about it, whether you're bouncing from Discord or to WhatsApp, or, getting now back to, like, you're also on your social media platforms like TikTok or Instagram, you basically have different identities between those, but you have some type of semblance of having some type of key or base identity of who you are in these environments. And just like how we have people have said, hey, well, we don't have hoverboards yet, but you look around any metropolitan street and you see these scooters that are electrified, and conceptually those are hoverboards, right? And so I kind of feel the same way that in the metaverse, we've just been doing it, and we just don't. I think most people envision us fully embodying these virtual
I
worlds to
mean,
say
I
that's a
don't
metaverse.
disagree with that, but what I'm more reacting against are people who are a bit more self-satisfied with where we are today. Strauss Zelnick, the CEO of Take Two Interactive, said in one of our talks at a GamesBeat event that look at Second Life. Like, it was an abject failure. It didn't deliver the metaverse the way people expected. And if you're talking about the metaverse, look at what we're doing with GTA Online, right? GTA Online has, hundreds of millions of people engaging with it. Um, uh, it's already here, right? And so, like, all these sort of dreams people have of creating a metaverse, he feels are like, been there, done that. A lot of it didn't work. We're making games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, uh, to that, I say, like, where's your imagination? Like, Second Life wasn't instantaneous, right? In this clunky, you fly around, it didn't look real, right? And so, it in that sense, it was like same features of the metaverse, but not real enough, right? And so, like, when it's not real enough, not real time enough, um, not as blowing your mind away, then that's not the metaverse, right? The metaverse hasn't had its real test yet as to whether we want that or not, because something that you can describe with all the same words. Between, like, the vision of Second Life and where it was and what it achieved versus what's in our heads as to where we want this to go. A lot more like Ready Player One, right?
Sure, sure,
the
sure.
movie, right? So
that's cool. And we've had many discussions about this, like life after Gen AI, but we have really great VR headsets today that are consumer ready. And now that we have even blockchain that allows digital ownership, you've been through so many tech cycles, right? What are you most excited about, and why, in terms of these new tech that's been coming into our lives the last 2 or 3 years at mass scale?
well, I am looking forward to seeing different milestones along the way that help sort of signal that something new is underway. So, like, I'm happy that Apple decided to announce the Apple Vision Pro and that it's coming next year. Not so happy that it costs $3,500, because when I look at something like Moore's Law and how fast technology can change and how the economics around new technologies sort of unfold, it makes me think, oh man, it's going to be a long time before anyone can afford um, and get a $300 device from Apple that does some of the same things that this thing can do. And so I am excited that, like, it feels like the beginning of something like the new iPhone, right? But you know. Something that is only going to be affordable to less than 1% of the population, right? That's, whatever achievement it achieves, that's not meeting the requirements of saying, getting us to the metaverse, right? You want a lot of people, you want a mainstream mass market people to be in the metaverse. So Apple Vision Pro is pointing in very interesting directions for technologies that might work. I also think that generative AI is an amazing technology that's going to push everything along faster and farther. And so I don't think it's like, in some ways it is, but some ways it's not going to kill off everything else. And that's a big trend in games, but it is becoming the thing that people are investing in now. And so if you have an AI in games startup, then you're getting a lot of attention from all the venture capitalists that are now investing in games. But, this doesn't mean that, say, the metaverse is dead, or that blockchain is dead, or that esports is dead, or that VR is dead. Like all these trends, they actually get some kind of boost from AI. And when you combine them, then you have like real market opportunities.
Yeah, and these are also just tech cycles too. We've seen, even XR go out of interest for investments and into the I guess the cultural stratosphere of what's hot until just recently with the Quest 2 bringing that interest back again. And then I think it also kind of fizzled out, at least from the cultural norms. Hey, I bought it for Christmas, checked it out with my friends, played Beat Saber, put it down, haven't found any really great content. And then we see another huge lift and buzz around the Apple Vision Pro. What do you think about the Apple Vision Pro as a tech
I think
device?
the contrast between, say, the Vision Pro and MetaQuest 3 that's coming this fall for $500 is a very interesting one. Like the MetaQuest 3 is going to have some very interesting mixed reality, pass-through camera technology in it that is in the MetaQuest Pro right now for more than $1,000, right? But and so that it's fun to see the price of these things coming down, and I think Mark Zuckerberg has gotten a lot of criticism for spending too much on the metaverse, right? And the recent layoffs at Meta, are making people conclude that it didn't work, right? That those investments didn't pay off. Well, they're losing about $3 billion a quarter on these investments in the metaverse technology, but we haven't seen that technology get deployed yet. It's not in the market yet, and those losses are still related to secret things that are still going on. They haven't pulled back that much on those investments. They also have they have so much profits coming from the social media side of the business that they aren't actually losing money overall, right? They're still making a ton of money as
Right.
as Facebook and Instagram, and so I think the conclusion everybody drew was that, oh, Meta's laying off people, therefore the metaverse is dead. Like that's a pretty bad conclusion to come to. I still think those investments are we're going to see them see the light of day, and then at that point, I think Zuckerberg understands that if Apple sort of is allowed to basically own the future the way it owns smartphones and iPhone now, then his company is in a very bad position, right? And then, so, like, I think all the investments he's making on this front, they make perfect sense when you think of the hidden budgets that everybody else has in this space, right? They are unique in the market now in announcing we're losing $3 billion a quarter here, right? But how much did Apple spend on the Apple Vision Pro?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. We probably think that Apple probably has the capacity to spend a whole lot more than Meta spends.
Yep.
And it has never entered this, it hasn't put a toe in this market yet, right? And so Microsoft as well, similar. Like, this was the same complaint, I think, that, say, Magic Leap had when people were laughing at Magic Leap and saying, you guys raised $1.5 billion. You're so stupid. You spent all that money on something that didn't work, right? And then they're looking around at their competitors and they're going, we are being outspent many times over by companies that can just hide these budgets because they're the tech giants, and they're doing this R&D the way we are too. It's just that we have to do it very publicly with venture money and not as much of it. So I do think that there's a lot of investment going on in this space. A lot of it is AI related, but a lot of it is also going to be metaverse related. So I think to say that metaverse is dead the way so many people are right now, I think that's a little short-sighted.
I agree 100%. I think regarding tech cycles, there's always kind of a boom. There's a lot of hype. There's a hype cycle. And then, we've been through it many times through mobile gaming or through dot-com days. There's always an explosion around new tech just because it's novel, it's new, whether it's NFTs, whether it's XR. AI right now, it's on its big pulse, right? As we all know. But things just kind of fizzle out just because, hey, with any new technology, there's only so much you can talk about it until the next big thing you could talk about. In terms of the common statement, or at least some people believe that XR is really the interface for AI. What do you think about that? Like, being at the center of development technology, people are pitching you stuff all the time in AI and XR. Do you have like a strong thesis now that you've seen this all kind of like come and go?
And XR, do you also mean specific things for XR there?
No,
Yes.
XR is just kind of all embodiment of a headset,
Yeah.
whether it's AR, whether it's MR, but basically it's the interface of AI. And of course, like Gen AI and
Yeah.
how they're, creating video content now that, based on a Mid-Journey 2D image is fascinating, right? And if you really want the metaverse and if content is the problem, well, AI can fix that. And we're now just at the baby stages. Like, what do you think about all this stuff?
I mean, there's some very interesting projects I've heard about that uh, needed something like generative AI as the solution, right? And um, Brendan Green is a good example, right? He came up with Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, PUBG, and
PUBG.
it established the battle royale as the main sort of genre of first-person shooters. Really, it took
Well,
over.
there's Counter-Strike first, but
Yeah,
he just did it better.
yeah, it took over the shooter market though, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he got wealthy from that. He's started the new company, Player Unknown's Productions, and he announced that what he wants to do next is basically create an Earth-sized world, right? And then create all of the things that could happen in that world and function, and the weather and things like that, and then let players loose in it for them to create their own ideas and their own games. And he believed that like blockchain was going to be important and essential for this kind of thing, where as you're bringing your things from another game, you come into this space, you cross the border, and those things get converted. Yeah. And I'm going like, wow, Brendan, you got 25 people working at your company. You're gonna create a bunch of stuff with them, but you can only create so much. You're gonna also have them create their own things like user generated content. But how does the world get built out, and how do you translate those things coming across at the border into something that's not out of place in this new world, right? And he said, well, we'll leave that to AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going like, oh, okay, that's kind of a big part of your plan that you're entrusting to something that maybe isn't here yet, right? But look, a couple years later,
Right.
AI is actually here, and so like, you know, that plan of creating things with your own dedicated game developers and with user generated content and with AI, combine all those things, you could do amazing things, right? And so, uh, uh, so much of the worlds we want to create can now be generated programmatically on the fly and close to maybe real time. And that is like going to make people feel like, hey, this world is a lot more real than I thought. And that's very key to having a real metaverse or a metaverse world. So that's big. I think that XR has been on a different path than simply things like the consoles, like everybody is getting hit by a slowdown in Moore's law right now. And so if you thought about, say, even just things like the PlayStation 5, like where's our PlayStation 5 Pro? Right? We're a few years into this. It may be coming, but it's not here yet. And where's the smaller PlayStation 5? Right? These things are not happening, perhaps because we're not getting the chip revs every 2 years like we used to, right? And Moore's law, predicts that those chips get twice as fast every couple of years. And when you're down to physics on the atomic level, and your layers of atoms are like 20 atoms thick or so, you're not going to get the same kinds of advances that we saw over the last few decades. And so Moore's law slowed down, and XR is on a different path. It's more like whatever law governs the advancement of optics, right? If optical technology moves fast, then we're going to get these headsets, these amazing headsets, sooner than. But we haven't, and so I'm not sure what's going to happen with something like an Apple Vision Pro coming out at $3,500 in 2024, and how long would sort of natural improvements take before that becomes a $300 device? I can't even, it could take 10 years.
Yeah.
It could take more than that.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I'm worried about like how does technology move forward. The good thing is that, hey, AI is going to come along and help all of this get better, right? It'll make chip manufacturing better. It'll make designing chips better. It'll make designing optics easier, I think, right? So again, it's not going to be a cure-all, but it's definitely something that's arriving at the right time. We need these things, because if we're reliant on current technology to power the entire metaverse, we're gonna melt the polar ice caps with all the data centers we're gonna have in the world that are going to be needed to support that, right? So I'm both optimistic and gloomy about technology at the same time.
Yeah, I think there is a love and hate relationship with technology, because we understand technology also depletes resources, and we're all obviously not doing a great job right now. But at the same time, you can't stop the train, right? In terms of innovation. But you touched on a couple of important things that I want to double click on. It's such a weird future. Like, I don't know why people aren't stopping and say, whoa, what are you talking about? AI is going to create generative content. Like No Man's Sky, when that came out, we're like, wow, this is going to be cool. This is a console game. You're going to explore space, and things will be procedurally generated with AI. But then when it came out, people were like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it got some good traction. But after several months, even myself, I was like, well, what do I do next? Like, there's other games that I can play. Do you think we're going to go into that state even with generative AI? Like, what state are we in, do you think? Like, are we going to get to that, huge leap to get to, the holodeck with AI?
Yeah, I mean, there are some problems now. I think OpenAI created ChatGPT with a very large language model, and invested hundreds of millions of dollars to making that happen. And the problem with that is that that's not going to scale. Like, if you want to get better and better large language models for the AI, do you have to keep dumping all this data into brand new models? I think they also threw everything into the degree that maybe it's not distinguishable what's copyrighted material and what's not, what's trademarked, right? And so a lot of companies are having to put the brakes on right now and say, okay, we want all the functionality of generative AI, but we don't want to step on anybody's toes and violate their trademarks. And so that means we got to create our own large language models, right? And their own private large language models with their own owned intellectual property thrown into it, and not the stuff that, A, is copyrighted by somebody else, but also B, just public domain captures of copyrighted material, right? Like this whole thing of you can grab my image and use it because we were on a Zoom call together, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not going to be permissible. It's not going to hold up in courts as far as I can foresee. But there are interesting things that can be applied. Like, say, if you apply blockchain to things that are created with a very transparent generative AI model, you could say, hey, this actually did, take something from copyrighted or trademark material, and Dean owns that, right? And 2% of the success of this particular instantiation is due to Dean's contribution from that went into the large language model. And so you owe Dean 2% of the revenues. Like, that's trackable because of something like blockchain, right? And so blockchain could argue that, well, you got to stick us in because this is the only way to track how things get used across many different kinds of models like this. So I think this whole period we're in is going to hold people up the same way regulations held up blockchain technology, blockchain games, crypto tokens in the sort of previous round of innovation here. And the situation is similar in that, like, the big companies say, okay, we're going to put the brakes on this. None of our studios can use this stuff until we get clarity. And the clarity has to come from regulators. Well, in the US, the regulators are pretty slow, right?
Yeah.
And they're involved right now in trying to claw back a bunch of money raised by all the cryptocurrency companies during the period of time when they were thinking, is this legal or is this illegal? Well, let's, actually, it's illegal that they raise this money from ordinary investors and we're basically selling securities without complying with securities law, trying to claw back that money. They did lose a case, a big case with the Ripple case recently, which, may put a lot of companies in the clear. But the funny thing here that happens in the market is the big companies wait and the startups race ahead, and the startups don't care if I'm going to jail or I take that risk if I got the chance to become the platform owner or the trendsetter.
Yeah, you touch on a couple of really fascinating points. So I want to make sure I don't forget them. But one you touched upon was, hey, everyone's got this footprint now on social media, Zoom calls, right? And you said, hey, there needs to be a way to figure out how to reimburse people who gets their data into the language, these huge LLM models for AI to be trained on. Isn't that universal basic income then? Like, right? Isn't it? Like, everyone should get broken off something if the AI is using your data, right?
Yeah. I mean, universal basic income has advocates that still see opportunities in the future. Like, if you get residual income from things you created over time, then you have a little less need to work, right? It's like I've always been in favor of people who are paid to play games, and that we have it backwards at the moment, where we pay money, $70 to a game company to play their games. Well, in fact, like, our attention should be so valuable that maybe they should pay us for playing their games, right? Instead of playing somebody else's games. A lot of people say, that makes no sense as a business model. But why does it make sense for us to keep trying to find jobs and to find work in the age of AI, right?
Yeah.
AI is coming along to wipe out every job, including computer programming, right?
Absolutely. All the jobs that were thought untouchable. Yeah.
Programmers at all when AI can write the programs, right? And then, like, if there are no jobs and there's no work for us to do, what do what do we do? Well, maybe we could play games. Is my answer, right?
Yeah.
We could have a more leisurely focused economy, and you know, who needs a bad job, right?
Right.
We don't need bad jobs. We need more human fulfillment, and maybe AI will get us there. I mean, and also I feel like, just as AI is creating or is destroying a lot of jobs and will destroy a lot of jobs, it's also going to create so many opportunities, things that were never possible before. Those things will generate jobs for those people who want jobs, right?
That's right. And maybe that's the end game. The metaverse allows it where we're not having to maybe deplete natural resources or as much as, the environmental cause, because, there's things that powered the technology, but maybe this metaverse is universal basic income where we're actually living our lives in these utopian digital worlds. Have you ever thought about that?
Well, it could wind up in bad ways. What was the Pixar movie?
Wally?
Yeah, well, so we could just wind up watching TV all the time.
That's right. That's right.
Getting chubby, just sitting there doing nothing. So hopefully that's not the end state that we wind up in. But yeah, I think there's interesting things to think about, like how can we sort of guide ourselves in a more structured way to a desired outcome. Nobody wants the AI to become sentient or sapient to the degree that it decides humans are the problem,
Yeah.
because if we got rid of them from the planet, then the planet would be much better off.
Right.
We don't want AI to make that discovery. Yeah, that's a little worrisome.
I totally agree. I always wanted to ask you this question because your conference, the GamesBeat Summit, is known to attract really the executives of companies that kind of want to know the inside track of technology and especially around gaming. And I witnessed you in the early days actually being an advocate for, or not advocate per se, but at least covering NFTs and Web3. And it all goes back to that original statement you made, like, hey, we should get paid for playing games. But that's kind of the ethos around Web3 gaming, which is, hey, play to earn, play to move. You're basically playing these games for your attention. And based on that attention, there's a currency involved and there's speculation how much that token might be worth by more people playing the game. And you got a lot of flack early on because you were supporting some of these people that, had money because, again, we went through a huge hype cycle around blockchain gaming and they're being sponsors at your events. What was your rationale or thinking around some of that backlash around Web3 gaming? And how do you feel about it now, seeing that you went from beginning to end and where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's worked out as well as anybody thought so far, and I think that is still why it's vulnerable right now, and it still needs to show why did we put all of this money into it, and prove out the case. And so, good games need to launch using blockchain technology. I still see very interesting examples of good things that are underway, right? But we're waiting for something like the Clash of Clans for blockchain games to still emerge. But I also, have I'm always curious. I always watch people and watch smart people and what they do, and when they move into this space and they sort of talk themselves into it, I want to understand that. And if they become true believers in it, like, I'm going to ask them why. And that's my job. I'm supposed to be a curious journalist. I'm not necessarily going to take sides against something. Like people have said, so like, blockchain games are nothing but scams. They're like all the crypto scams, and they are ripping people off, and they're a new way to just monetize the hell out of people, right? And all the people who moved into it were inspired by similar situations in the past where they saw the promise of free to play games, right? And said, look, this could really revolutionize gaming. 95% of the companies that got into it failed, right? And everybody was saying 95% of this stuff is all scams. Therefore, let's throw out the whole, baby with the bathwater, right? Uh, why go into it if 95% of this is scam? I got news for you guys. 95% of all companies are scams until they succeed, right? uh, 95% of the internet companies, they failed. Was the internet a failure? No. The 5% who made it through, the Amazons, the Googles, right?
That's right.
They're setting the standards for the new world. And so, uh, I know a lot of these companies are going to be scams, are going to fail. But I'm not going to sort of uh, be in the business of trying to predict which ones are which. I feel like there's a whole wave of human interest driving in this direction. And that's what I need to cover. Right? People are saying this is the next gold rush. This is the next big thing. And there's promises here that can take everything to a new level. And those people are going to get criticized as well for making these moves. And like, it's no different from when the iPhone started and people said, why do you want to go make those shitty mobile games? Right? Well, mobile games is the biggest part of the market now, and free to play is also the majority of the market in games now.
Word.
We're in a decade later, and people don't realize that they're also threatened that their old favorite things are going to go away, right? But that hasn't happened either. It's like TV didn't kill radio, and PC games and console games are very strong markets, and they are where much of the innovative intellectual property of the gaming industry is still created, right? It's like the heart and soul of creativity is still in those parts of the industry. They're not as big as not as big as a percentage of the whole industry as they once were. But the game industry, now is 10 times bigger than it was because of free to play, because of mobile and other technologies that many people said were stupid. Right?
That's right. I mean, going back to the games industry being stronger than ever, you've stated in the past about Xbox being in the right position to lead the metaverse efforts, with their acquisitions with all the big gaming publishers now, and of course owning the Xbox ecosystem. What do you think Xbox's position now in the metaverse? What kind of initiatives or strategies do you think like other companies like Sony's and competitors will adopt to match what Microsoft is doing, or maybe even surpass them?
I think, I used to sort of think that anybody with a big, giant network of data centers around the world was going to be one of the most powerful companies to beat in any new innovative environment or technology that came along. And so, like Apple, through something like Siri, would have amassed so much data in their data centers that they could understand people, understand customers, and create things that are needed for them. And also, kick off new technologies, like NVIDIA with its knowledge of data centers has been able to create cloud gaming with GeForce Now through a whole, sort of worldwide network of data centers, all connected together, very advanced computing. So some of that made sense, but it's funny that Chat GPT, was it created by one of these companies? No, it's created by OpenAI. Right? It's like not necessarily one that you think of as the Amazons of the world, Google's, Meta, and so it's interesting that just having the data centers itself was not by definition the way to succeed in the market. I'm trying to remember where were we going with this now?
Oh no, just in, in terms of moves of the metaverse, like bring it back to the metaverse and with game consoles specifically, like Nintendo, for example. Like I'll give you another example of like when
one interesting thing is Nintendo is definitely not participating in a lot of this sort of online gaming economy as much as it could. It has done interesting things, like it's done the Super Mario movie, right? But I think when I interviewed Bobby Kotick about the
I remember that article.
agreement, between Microsoft to buy Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion. One of the things he brought up was that, we had a need for AI experts in this company and we couldn't hire them fast enough. And we looked over at Microsoft and we saw all the people that they have working in AI across that whole company, not just in their games division, and saw like this is maybe one of the answers to our problem. And he said that 18 months ago, right? And look what's happened to the world. Like
That's right.
everybody in the world needs these AI experts in a big way. They can't hire them fast enough. They can't find them, and so in that sense, I think it is true that a company like Microsoft has some very big advantages, having a lot of things like, say, cloud technology, AI experts, search engine, that are going to be necessary parts of the future for people who want to create, outstanding games. I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in that sense, they have advantages. There are other companies that had advantages too. You would have thought Google would have so many advantages in the gaming space as well, because it had the data centers, it had all these AI experts as well. Turns out Stadia didn't succeed. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's maybe more a business model case, or a problem for them. I think there's interesting requirements for the companies of the future to succeed. That includes AI people, probably a whole lot of gaming talent and entertainment talent as well, all in the same company. And that's kind of rare to see or find today. Like, does Disney have that? Does Apple have that? Does Electronic Arts have that, or Microsoft? And those are good questions that no single company may be really prepared to dominate. And I do think that's a good thing. I think everybody wants and hopes for an open metaverse.
That's right.
One that's dominated by walled gardens. Right? If there's an advocacy position that I have, it's that the open metaverse is the one that should succeed of all the efforts going on right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You can't really have an open metaverse that mirrors society if it was just one government, right? I don't think that would fly.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to games,
Mm-hmm.
you see a lot of pitches, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talk to all the players. Why haven't we gotten that AAA? I mean, there's some games I would call Alex like a AAA XR game, right? But what are the missing ingredients why we don't have more AAA or at least blockbuster XR games that kind of break the mold? What are the missing ingredients do you think there are today in today's gaming ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was that there was a pretty strong come down when the VR market of today turned out to be $20 billion market instead of $150 billion. So the money that was pouring into it on the assumption that we were going to have a much bigger market, that money kind of went away and it stayed in things like AAA games for PCs and consoles, right? And so I think expectations have been sort of reduced for this market, and so if you look at how many game venture capitalists out there, there are well over 100 now, where there used to be one or two 10 years ago. Now there's many more people putting money into games, but not so many of them are dedicated to VR, right? To XR. Instead, they're looking at, say, the biggest part of the market, either mobile games or PC games or console games. And as long as VR doesn't have the sort of landmark games to cause people to shift, then I think they get less investment, right? With just a couple of, say, dedicated VR funds pouring money into games, it's not enough to finance super big AAA games.
Yeah, I think the market right now is going through a change. There's just so many different technologies, and everyone's right now talking about AI. Like you've seen some of the companies that are putting out job postings of paying people $1 million to be the head of AI, and people don't know exactly what that means. GamesBeat, you guys are just covering everything from all the new technologies from Web3, XR, AI, etc. How do you ensure that you keep creating content that's still engaging and informed when there's just so much out there? What's Dean's strategy? How do you even look at content and figure out what to cover?
Well, I mean, you start backing up from what you can do in a day. Like, if you're doing a story without interviews with anyone, you can do that in a half hour, right? But that kind of content is pretty generic, right? It's just regurgitating a press release and something uh, any other publication can do. So then you want to interview people, like add your own unique questions and answers and takes on what's the importance of this technology. And so then those stories take longer to write. You can't do as many of them, and you can only do so much in a day. Like you could get 100 pitches a day, or see 100 stories happen in various parts of the world related to games. But
Mm,
your max is going to be, you know, it's somewhere between 1 and 10
mm,
of these things can you address, and so you have to be merciless in that way. Like every day is going to be a different day for what qualifies as a story. Like if there's 100 things that come out on a Tuesday morning, but only one thing comes out on Monday morning, well, you know what your story is for Monday morning.
right.
On Tuesday, you have a tougher decision. It's like, okay, I'm going to pick the top 5 or 10 out of this 100 different things I could write about that day. And so there's a tremendous triage process. I do take, say, tips and pitches from people I know more so than people I don't know, because in the back of your head you're always saying, I don't want to write about some new scam of the week and get fooled by it. I want to write about something that's credible people who've done something before, less likely to be running scams, right? They're
Right.
more like serious, real businesses. So a lot of that matters. I mean, I think what becomes popular for people to read, we get feedback that way, um, and what are people talking about? Get feedback there. If nobody's talking about esports anymore, then hey, maybe we cover less of that and cover more of what people are talking about. And yet you don't sort of write off these things as permanently done, right?
Of
Um,
course.
it would be like writing off mobile games the first time they had their downturn, instead of realizing 10 years later they're the biggest industry. It's
That's
like,
right.
yeah, so folks don't cover these businesses properly sometimes, in their life cycles, the industry's life cycle.
Dean's, you know, Dean's world, right? Like you have this conference, and of course you're one of the leading voices in game journalism. I'm sure you've always gotten pitched to like help out with other gaming funds and VCs. Like I was always surprised, like you never made that transition because you have such a wealth of knowledge. Like, what's next for Dean?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always liked the position of being able to collect information across all categories, like that that helped me get to the bigger picture. And I like doing that. I like talking to people. I like the community we have formed in terms of like readers who read repeatedly or come to our conferences repeatedly. So that feels like a good achievement. And I don't necessarily want to go off and do something brand new where I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm,
It's like I feel like I have this. I know what I'm doing. I know what to look for in
mm,
this kind of job. And there were people who were saying like, "Hey, this CEO likes talking to you because you get to talk to everybody, and he doesn't. Like, he's this big important guy running a company, and you would think that, hey, I'd rather be like him, right? But um, he can't go talk to his competitors
Mm-hmm.
the way that I could go talk to his competitors, right?
Right.
Get a different point of view. It's great for being a fly on the wall to watch the interesting things.
That's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I always ask this for my guest. The VR report is kind of like a time capsule where we're at in technology, specifically around XR.
Mm-hmm.
What predictions do you have in the next year? And then let's go even further out to 5 years from now for XR, AI, and Web3.
Well, I think we are going to see like new platforms launch in the next year. We're going to see both the Meta Quest 3 and the Apple Vision Pro hit the market, and the competition between them is going to be very interesting and dynamic. And there's going to be big efforts put into recruiting developers to your side instead of the other side. So that helps spur economic activity in the market, right? Fundings will happen because of that. I think gamers need to come into this and embrace some of these things more than they are now. But I do see some very interesting uses of the technology, say in the video pass-through art space, right? And you could have video pass-through games that let you do things like shoot up a bunch of robots in your garage,
Mm-hmm.
and then other things like that get to be interesting. I think like 5-10 years from now, what everybody wants and I want is to have my glasses be the headset, right? And so that whole idea of Google Glass, not a bad one. Sadly, 20 years too early, probably.
Sure.
But this will become possible, given like the advance in march of technology and how much money is going into trying to make this happen. Like I mentioned, all the big tech companies have to be exploring this idea and trying to bring it forward into products, and they're just having to bide their time to wait for the right inventions to be made and for that tech to come along. I think when that's here, then the metaverse and things like it, pervasive AR, mixed reality, all of that becomes a no-brainer for the marketplace. And so I do think the best way to view something like the metaverse is with these future headsets, and not necessarily a smartphone. The smartphone can be good for viewing some of it, some part of it, participating in it anywhere in the world. But hey, if you can take that screen and get rid of it and put it into your glasses, then hey, we don't need smartphones anymore.
That's right.
So I think Tim Sweeney was the one who predicted that things like big screens and TVs would go away. Right? Why do you need a screen on your laptop if you have a 120-inch screen in front of your eyes using your glasses?
Yeah, I think that future is coming. I think it's going to take some time where the form factor gets down, and then of course being able to stream data, because people probably don't want to carry like extra pucks in their pocket, but I don't know if TVs are necessarily going to go away, or monitors, just because it's just super accessible. I think people will want to have them on their face, but not to have like something physical. I don't know. I don't know yet if that's just all going to go away, or if they're just going to be other tools that we're going to have in our arsenal.
Yeah, we need a Moore's law for batteries to come or something.
That's right.
The saddest thing was when I saw the wire coming down from the Apple Vision Pro.
Right.
Like, oh, wow, that looks cool. I bet that's plugging into your iPhone, right? No. It's plugging into a battery.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, oh, shoot.
Yeah, that's right. I think a lot of people had that same kind of emotion. Like, wow, I thought I was going to connect to your iPhone. That would just make more sense. But you can have the compute. So I think that's the trade-off there. Yeah. Dean, I always love talking and hang out with you, man. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today.
Thank you. love the conversation.
Thanks, dude. All right, I'm gonna press stop. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate it, man.